Hey there, everybody. This is Tom Martin, and this is the Winners Retrospective that we're having today. And we're really lucky to have 4 winners from last year, from 2021, with us today from the American Legal Technology Awards. And we get to talk with them a little bit about what legal innovation is, how they won, what they're doing, and what they see the future as holding. So first off, I want to thank our sponsors, ROG Legal Insurance, Clio, GNGF, My Case, and LawPay. We couldn't be doing this without them, and we greatly appreciate their support. I also wanted to give a little plug for our upcoming event on October 9th. We're going to have the American Legal Technology Awards Gala. It's going to be a dinner. It's going to be formal. There's going to be a band playing, dancing, and it's going to be really awesome. So myself, Patrick, and Kat are going to be there as co-hosts, as well as Alex Sue, who's a social media maven you may have heard about, and we're looking forward to having all of you there. So please go to americanlegaltechnology.com to register. You can still get an early bird ticket. All right, with that, I'd like to give introductions to everyone. If you could each tell us a little bit about where you work, what you do, and let's start with Ariadna. You work with Ayuda Puerto Rico.
Ayuda Legal Puerto Rico. So Tom, thank you for having me here, and thank you everyone that's sharing not only this panel, but also this transmission. So yeah, I am the founder and director of Ayuda Legal Puerto Rico. We are a nonprofit and non-LSE that's working with the right to housing and climate justice in the island. Most of our work has to do with legal tech, but it also has to do with community initiatives. So I'm just really glad to share a little bit about what has happened in the last year.
Awesome. And Josh, you are with Unicord, and what category were you recognized in?
At Enterprise last year.
Fantastic. And what are you doing now? And give us a little background on what you're doing.
Yes, sure. So first of all, Tom, thanks for having me. I can't say how important it is that I really love what the American Legal Technology Awards is doing to recognize, innovators that sometimes aren't, part of the popular commercialized crowd. So I think it's really important work. So I'm Josh Blandi, the CEO and co-founder of Unicord. And we've been working on our latest version of legal data APIs, which we just released into beta. And so it's a pretty exciting time. We've been working about 2 years on that. So exciting, we'll be releasing that this fall.
Fantastic. Glenn, if you could tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Certainly. Thank you, Tom. Thanks for having me here today. I'm with the Legal Services Corporation. We're the federal funder of civil legal aid across the country. I've been working there since 1999. As I tell people, I've been working there since the last century. My main focus is on the Technology Initiative Grant Program. That's a special line item we get from Congress each year to make grants to the legal aid programs to improve the service delivery model that they do using technology, and also to provide resources to self-represented litigants so that the ones that we can't help, with our funding level, we can't help everybody. We have to make tools available to them. So I've been working since 2000 on developing websites, automated forms, instructional videos, integrations with e-filing systems, those types of things. But I've been doing law office technology since I got out of law school and set up my own practice in 1974. One of my first experiences was hiring a programmer to write a document assembly program for Scripsit, which was the word processing program from Radio Shack computers. This was before DOS came out. So I've been doing this a while.
Fantastic. And you were recognized in the category of
individual
achievement. And that brings us to you, Dina. If you could tell us about who you are and what you do. I think you have moved from the from being a judge to private practice. Is that right?
That's right. So first, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, and for the recognition, and for everything you do. I did in March of this year, I transitioned from the Utah Supreme Court, where I had served on the court for a number of years, to private practice, non-ironically to Wilson Sonsini, which is, if you know law firms, is particularly interested in representing firms in the tech and life sciences space. So certainly part of the decision. I've been working away in a number of different areas, kind of just from a different perspective since that time, and loving life on the outside.
Fantastic. One question, that an obvious one that comes to mind, and I think that all four of you are experts at this, so I'm hoping to hear what you have to say about it. But what exactly is legal innovation? I mean, a lot of people, we talk about it all the time at conferences and events, and but you actually have done it. You've been recognized for it. So I'd love to hear what your definition of legal innovation is. Dino, if we could start with you.
Sure. Look, it's disrupting the curve for me, not just in the sense of legal innovation, but innovation involves disrupting, right, the status quo, and maybe shaking people up a little bit. It's often threatening to people, which is part of the challenge that we have, is overcoming that and educating people around it. But it's scary, right? But disruption is scary. Disruption is necessary.
So, Ariadna, what do you think about that? Do you agree, or do you have something to add?
I agree with Dino, and I think that it also has to do, we work with a legal empowerment framework. So we try to direct our efforts so that people can self-represent themselves. So it's this idea of knowing, using, transforming the law. And I think it also has to do with socializing, legal tools. So for us, legal innovation has to do with, putting, placing like information in the hands of people, like making it more accessible, connecting it with advocacy or lobbying efforts so that people can change what is unfair. And I think that innovation also has to do, I live in Puerto Rico. We have been through 5 years of disasters. You name it, like not only the pandemic, but major hurricanes, floods, earthquakes in 5 years. And I think it has to do with your capacity to pivot and strategize quickly, but it also has to do with your capacity to sustain it long enough so that you can measure and assess and, have accountability over that legal innovation strategy. So it's a lot of things.
Those are really great points. I mean, like, yes, you could innovate, but if you're not around long enough to see what the results are of what your innovation, you don't know if it's really effective or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Glenn, what do you think about innovation? What does it mean to you?
When I first started this, Tom, I thought innovation was kind of like the brand new idea, there's something that nobody had ever thought of. But as I've been doing the grants for now 20 years, to me, a lot of the innovation is much the same as the evolution. They look at something that we have now and figure out either a way to improve it or a way to use it differently. I'll give you an example of like the online intake systems that we started out with. They started out as just a form on a website that people could submit as a web form, but then they've slowly evolved so that they work in a triage system that asks people questions that helps directing them to the right place. In other words, and to me, that's a lot of what innovation looks like, is how do we take existing tools, add improvements, converge them together, and make a new product on the other end.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it that is, I mean, also beyond tech. Like Ariadna pointed out, it's, like also educating people about how to use it, the socialization of these tools. Josh, what do you think about innovation?
Yeah, I think really being a legal innovator and innovation in general is really kind of its core is about being an entrepreneur. So I agree with that. It's, It's about not necessarily going with the status quo. It means you have to listen to your clients, and the market. Also means you have to have a lot of conviction and dedication and kind of grit, if you will, to willing to do things that nobody else is willing to do. Oftentimes you really just have to jump in and kind of follow your path. I'd say big points are people who are doing and leaders in legal innovation typically aren't following the crowd. They're not afraid to kind of be an outlier or fail in that matter. They're really willing to kind of see that work all the way through, regardless of where that ends in failure or success. And so, kind of what we've done as a company, this is now my second company I've founded, those core elements are kind of a part of any, legal innovator, innovation in general, where, you observe something, you listen to your clients, and you begin to kind of follow a pathway. But it really takes that, having that dedication and that will to keep moving forward. In our case, like as a company, with what we did in terms of our legal data APIs and providing access to legal data, content or information is foundational for law, right? And really that boils down to data and being able to, as a company, come out and say, hey, we want to kind of, democratize data and make it easily accessible for anyone and everyone and consumable, was kind of a bold and new move within the legal space. What's happening in other industries that usually this type of information was sitting behind paywalls and sitting behind systems that really only allowed access to certain players, typically that had a lot of money to innovate with that. And so that was a move we made that nobody else was doing. We weren't sure if it was going to work. But at the end of the day, what's been amazing is, we've kind of seen this ecosystem evolve now. We have legal aid organizations and policymaking using our data, as well as, law firms and big law firms and insurance companies, right? And it's all foundational in terms of being able to access and use structured data.
That it's great to have each of you speaking about it, because it's different facets of this problem that we're all trying to solve. And so, Josh, it sounds to me like what I hear you speaking to is the ability to communicate the fruits of this innovation, right, to other people, like to be able to share that. So there's socialization, there's the actual technology, then there's the communication of what the results are, and then actually tracking the results over time and having the will to do it. One thing we talked about off camera before we started was the second quarter downturn and the potential recession in the United States. But that's a challenge, but there's also natural disasters that come up, and you just continue to move through and to affect change regardless. The next topic I want to talk about is what makes a legal innovator. So we talked about what legal innovation is, but I'm very curious as to whether or not, is there something in your backgrounds that kind of push you towards this? Like, was there something unique, or maybe not, but was there something that kind of pushed you in this direction? Ariadna, what do you think?
I think we all have something in us. I think it, at least for us or for me as a founder, it had to do with this idea of building a community of legal empowerment, of lawyers who think alike or who wanted to build something towards the same goals of transformation. It's been 8 years. So at the beginning, Ayuda Legal Puerto Rico was really small because we are non-LSC and we never received any kind of governmental funding. It was like a struggle at the beginning, trying to grow the organization. And I remember that we started like developing tech tools by ourselves. We are the generation of Live Journal, of MySpace. we all learned like a little bit of coding, something really, 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 really sad, but enough, to start thinking about tech tools as a way to transform. And we already had, this idea of being human rights lawyers and being lawyers who work so that someday lawyers will not be needed as part of the equation of people and exercise of rights. So I think that all of those ingredients started like building a path that ended up like developing trust of foundations, trust of clients, trust of communities, and that led to a very quick growth after Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, and tech tools like started becoming like the outreach mechanism.
How about you, Josh? Is there something in your like when you grew up or from your parents that may have pushed you in this direction, sparked your interest in innovation? I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. I can say from looking back, I was always that kid. Maybe I got that from my father, as he was an entrepreneur, but I was the guy out mowing lawns or shoveling out snow or doing something to make money when I was a kid. And I kind of think that carried later on in life, where I realized that you're largely can be in control of your own destiny. And that's one of the things that entrepreneurship has given me, is that ability to, take control of what I'm able to focus on and do with my life. And, so kind of with, originally I found another company where we were having a lot of trouble getting a hold of legal data. And that's kind of really what set us on the path of forming Unicorp, was this kind of idea of, how we could make legal data as a service and really be able to like fit a need within, what we saw, a broader need within the market for being able to, I think, like what was pointed out earlier, building this ecosystem, we're all connected, right? And we're all connected in this case through, what we're doing with legal, and big ecosystem around that of people that are using data in different ways. And so, I think that foundation was laid when I was younger. I kind of chipped my teeth when I was, in my 20s and early 30s, in terms of what it takes to kind of, start and grow an organization. And I think a lot of that those are pretty foundational to just being a legal innovator. Innovator, period, are pretty synonymous with entrepreneurs.
So it definitely sounds like the entrepreneurship bug bit you when you were younger. Ariadna, I hear you talking about the early exposure to technology that we experienced with, like you said, MySpace and the coding, like HTML coding, just trying to like create something and figuring that out and how to use those tools to create something useful to people. Glenn, how about you? Was there something growing up that inspired you to do this?
My dad worked for the phone company, so I worked with phones and magnetos, and my friend and I even built a telephone one time using carbon and everything to see if we could just build one from scratch. So I was always kind of interested in electronics, but remember, I'm an old guy, so we didn't even have calculators. I had to do my chemistry problems with a slide rule. And so when I got out of law school and started my own practice, I realized that law school had not taught me anything about business. They had taught me the law, but they didn't teach me anything about the business of running a law office. So Jay Thunberg had a course that he was doing for Texas, and I went down to Texas and listened to his course, and then I bought a book from the ABA called How to Build a System for a Law Office, which was talking about paper forms. And as computers came out, I kind of took Jay's idea of using the support staff more than the lawyers, and the other are building the systems. And I put those together with computers. And like I said, I hired a programmer to actually build a document automation system so that I could make more money in my practice. I could charge fixed fees for certain things. The people could come in, they could talk with my support staff and fill out all the forms and all. And so I did that for quite a while. Wasn't all that rewarded just by making money. I took 6 years off of retirement in the middle to kind of figure out what to do next and got invited to legal aid. And I realized that in legal aid, we have a bottom line. We may not charge our clients anything, but our bottom line is the people served. And so I had used technology in private practice to improve my bottom line with money. And I wanted to take those same principles to legal aid and start working with the efficiencies there, because they weren't using any systems, no document automation, the case management systems were still written in DOS. And so I just started slowly working to do that with the legal aid program here in Oklahoma. And then LSC invited me to do it on a national stage and gave me, $4 or $5 million a year to pass out to people to start putting some of these ideas in place. So that's how I became an innovator. Is it was just good business.
Wow. And you definitely helped a lot of other people to innovate themselves through those, through those grants. It's been,
well, I hope so, but thanks.
It's a great legacy. Dino, how about yourself? Do you think was it your parents? Was it you? Was it nature, nurture? What do you think?
So this is an interesting question that I've thought about, and I'm going to start with, I'm picking up a spot at the university here, and they're going to call me the innovator in residence at the law school, but that's not the title I wanted. I wanted disruptor in residence. Josh is an innovator, right? He's an entrepreneur. I think people like that are born to it. Others, we because of whatever happened, had an opportunity to make a difference. And I don't think I have an entrepreneurial bone in my body, quite frankly. But when I got on the court and I had I could see the problem with providing access to justice for the vast majority of our citizens, I had an opportunity to disrupt, and that's what I did. I think that there's actually a meaningful difference between the two. And as I thought about even that first question you asked, right, it's reflected in the way that we kind of answered that question. Why that? Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll credit my parents. I'm son of an immigrant mother with a 6th grade education that grew up in a war-torn country, and a father that made it to like the first week of 10th grade and had to drop out to put 4 brothers through college and support his mom. And I think coming from that social milieu highlighted for me the need to try to improve the lot for lots of people. And when I had the opportunity, that's what I wanted to do.
Well, all four of you are certainly driven leaders in each of your fields, and it really shows in everything that you've done and in being recognized through the awards. And that's what I want to ask you next is, what was that like? These things come up from time to time, but with the American Legal Technology Awards, truly I and Patrick and Kat, like our motivation for it, it's a grassroots thing that we put together in 2020 when everything went down with COVID. We didn't plan it that way, but that's how it worked out. And our motivation was really to recognize people that are making a difference and making law better. And so many people responded to it through COVID and now in a positive way. And so that, this isn't an organization where we're hitting up tons of law firms for being a super lawyer or something like that. But I'd like to know, like, how did it feel to be recognized by your peers, Dino?
It's great, and let me tell you why. When Ariadna, in her response to your opening question, talked about being able the need to sustain this to make it real, otherwise it just goes away, and how you're ever going to measure it. Particularly, from my perspective, you're not getting paid for it, right? You're not getting any kind of remuneration for it, and it's hard, right? You draw a lot of slings and arrows when you're turning over apple carts. And recognition like this goes a long way to kind of stealing you and just kind of recharging your battery to keep up the good fight. It is meaningful.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that, because that was our motivation, is to make people even more motivated to continue what they're doing. Ariadna, where were you when you found out? How did it feel to learn that you won?
I was at home and I was really excited about it. And I like echo what Dino is saying, like it's like a motivation, you know, when we started developing one of our main tools, which is like the statewide website in Puerto Rico, ayudalegalpr.org. I remember that there was like a huge lack of trust on that kind of tool, but also like a lot of resistance from even lawyers or legal providers, like thinking what's going to happen if these people like go undercounted, how is it going to impact the statistics, how is it going to impact like the work of lawyers. And right now that website receives 2 million unique users, being one of the most used, like is the most used tool of that kind in Puerto Rico, but it had also become like a pro bono recruiting tool, and you know everything that it was throughout the hurricane, you know, and just being acknowledged for that kind of work. It's also validation of how much effort, and you know, it's a validation of the bet, because in the end of the day, it's a bet. You bet on something, and we are betting on innovation as the strategy. So it was like amazing, and it was also a source of hope.
Well, hope is necessary. It's what we start with, and we can't really move forward without it. So I'm glad that it inspired that for you. Josh, when you found out, how did that feel? Like, did it provide motivation for you? And what were you working on at the time?
I mean, I think there's really three, I've thought about this, and there's really kind of three important things that brought about. You know, first off, you know, we have a global operation. So we have, you know, large engineering ops out of India. You know, I have, you know, product and content people out of Florida. I have people in Oregon. I have people in California, people in Colorado, right? And imagine all of these people were working towards a common goal, kind of all connecting with each other in different ways. But when you see an award like this happen, right, it's the success and failures that the teams that brings us all together. And imagine if you're an engineer and you've been working on API development for the last 2 years on a product, and all of a sudden you finally get recognized. That is like huge. All the blood, sweat, and tears into that work, right? Give some purpose to your work. And so first, I think the recognition for the Unicorn team is huge motivator in terms of like our team and really feeling like they're contributing and doing something that's really shaking things up and is innovative. I also think that the other thing it brought about is a lot of awareness, right? So when you win an award like this, all of a sudden, you know, for a product that we offer, legal data as a service, there becomes an awareness that this service exists, that this is the company that's doing it, right? And I think the last really important thing is connections. You know, I can't tell you how many connections I've made as a result of winning an award, where people maybe just want to learn more, and that learning more has turned into really valuable relationships and partnerships over time. And so I think when you put those three together, it's pretty big. You know, also, as I pointed out in the beginning, the thing I like about what you're doing here is it's not a popularity contest like a lot of awards. You know, this is really driven by, you know, companies that are doing innovative things within a larger ecosystem within certain categories that are producing a positive change. And I love the whole aspect of, I look forward to coming out to Tennessee. You know, to be honest with you, I've never been there. Now I have a great excuse to be there. And it's really for these reasons, for the connections and the community that it brings.
Well, I've been to Nashville a few times, and I could say it's exceptional. It's a lot of fun. And thank you for that, for those words. One thing I want to make clear though, and I want to highlight them, is that we couldn't do any of this without our judges. And our group of judges, we have 24 of them, and they are standout leaders in their own right in terms of innovation and the work that they are doing to move, to move the dial and affect change and disrupt and innovate within the legal space. So I'm very, very thankful to them for helping us out. And they do it on a voluntary basis. And anyways, they're a great group, and I hope to see them all at the event. Glenn, how about you? Where were you at the time? How did you feel about being recognized by your peers?
Well, I was quite surprised, to be honest with you. I kind of, don't think of legal aid so much as being involved in a lot of these types of awards. And so I want to echo what was said about validation. I was here at home, just doing my normal work when, had my interview, and they let me know that I had won. And so it was just, you get kind of a glow the rest of the day, and, it just feels really good. But the validation is really important. When I started doing this, there wasn't a big legal aid technology community. Our first TIG conference that we had in 2000, we had 32 people there, right? And those were the grantees that came. Our last one in person in Portland, we had over 600 people from around the world that came to learn about legal aid technology. And, to me, this award is not just a recognition of my work, but I wouldn't be getting that award if it wasn't for all the hard work of all the other people in legal aid that have been working so much on technology. And now, the legal services technology in the United States is recognized worldwide as a leader. And so to me, the award was a validation to all that hard work that all those people have done for these last 20 years, putting us in that position. And it was nice to see that type of recognition. I know it came to me individually, but it really wasn't an individual effort. It was the effort of those hundreds of people who do technology for legal services across the country.
And how far we've come, right? Especially over the last 2 years, things have just changed dramatically in terms of how much interest there is within the space and the amount of new people trying their hand in creating legal innovation. And I could think to just 5 years ago and think how different it was then. So I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. And in terms of that direction, looking forward, and also looking at the present, I'm interested to know, what are you working on now? What do you have in the works? Glenn, if you don't mind sharing, what are you up to?
Well, like I said, I'm kind of lucky. I get millions of dollars every year to spend on different ideas. And one of the things that there's a couple of things I'm really seeing right now, Tom. One is around how we deliver legal information and resources to the users of the websites. And so much more emphasis on the user experience than we ever had. When we started with the websites, we basically were taking PDF forms and putting them up on the web so people could read them. And it just was, I guess it was better than nothing, but it really wasn't a really practical thing. Now we're using guided assistance so that people will log into the website, and even if they don't know that they've got a legal problem, they can type plain language describing their problem. An AI engine like Spot will kind of say, it looks like you're asking for this. And then step by step with these guided assistants, we're guiding them to an action plan to help them resolve their legal problem. We're not just giving 25 different articles on a web page as the results of a search. We're actually showing them the steps. And I've been working with Legal Navigator now for several years. That's a product that came out of our technology summit that we had, and a good project that Microsoft partnered with us on and put a lot of money in. And the idea is there's lots of resources out there, but they're in different places. There may be a bar site, there may be a court site, there may be a legal aid site, all with good resources. Well, the idea with these legal navigator portals are to get all those aggregated in one place and then to guide the people through so that, as I said, they come up with this action plan at the end. And then the other one, Josh was mentioning data. I'm seeing our programs being a lot more interested. We've actually got programs hiring data officers now, which is really exciting, so that we can look at that data, not just for internal purposes, which are good, but for trying to spot legal issues as they're developing, to see if there's one landlord that's doing something. You know, one of our projects found out they didn't have a high priority for helping people that were having their vehicles repossessed. You know, that just wasn't a high priority until they did a correlation with the data to show that where there were lots of vehicle repossessions, there were also lots of evictions because the person lost their job, they lost their housing. So we should not just try to stop the eviction, we should actually stop the repossession, and then maybe we won't get to the end to the eviction. So I'm just amazed at how innovative they're getting with using that type of data and all. So those are just a couple of the things that we're doing a lot around, is like I said, the guided assistance, the plain language AI, and then using data to help us be more responsive to legal issues.
Wow. Yeah, that's really exciting. And it makes it much more interactive and useful for people to be able to take them to the answers they actually need versus here's the encyclopedia, figure it out for yourself.
Right.
Dino, what are you working on now? Now that you're at a law firm, what are you doing differently, and what's in the works?
Well, I'm still at it with the innovation office, albeit from the outside versus the inside. As I mentioned, I'm going to be teaching at the university, at the law school, and we're going to teach a class in which basically how to be an innovator. And your project will be to have a proof of concept or something to go into the Utah sandbox, right? So it's help educating young people in the market about what's going on and continue to expand the sandbox. Yeah, so and it's working with incubators, or really it's going to be within the educational structure going forward to try to help people understand what's happening and to take advantage of the regulatory structure that we've put in place. So,
wow, that's awesome, because not only being a legal innovator, but also like opening the doors and educating the new class of innovators how to do it.
yeah, you know what? I tell you what, I think we probably all experience it. I mean, there are a few of us that have too many gray hairs in our beard, and my generation is a little more stubborn and resistant to some of this change. I've seen none of that. That really, it's really generational as I've been lecturing and teaching, and it's exciting, and it fills me with hope, right?
There's that word again, hope.
Yeah.
Ariadna, how about you? What are you working on right now? Is there something new that's in the works?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. Like, we are on the same track as Glenn. We have been doing human-centered design for a while and trying to shift the narrative to make it community-centered design now. So we're working with a few tools like directed to the deaf community. We're working with disaster survivors, like, not only thinking about that PDF posted that I hate and that I realize, Glenn, it's like still out there and we still have it in some parts of the website. But it's also thinking about, that interview process, that it's not only like guided interviews or doc assembly, but how can we also tie that with hotlines and chats where people can have a one-on-one lawyer at the same time? And that's something that we're working on. We launched this year and I'm making an awful translation in Spanish. It's beautiful, Centro Digital para la Autodefensa, or Digital Center for the Self-Defense. It's a tool that we created, which is basically a hub that lets people identify things that are happening, in particular with rental. So it lets people to create a contract, or to realize that they need a new contract, or connect with an advocacy meeting, or at the same time to file an FHA complaint. So it's something that it's more interactive, and that ties in the chat, the helplines, the doc assembly tools, the legal education posted on the websites. And that's something that we are really, really, really in love. About the data piece, we have a huge issue with data here in Puerto Rico as everywhere else. So because of the number of people that reaches Ayuda Legal Puerto Rico and the number of interviews that we fill out, using the website and using like these other tools beyond, traditional services, we're trying to develop like our own data analysis pieces. And that has been very useful, like to advance like advocacy and also like tying the dots, as Glenn was saying, like which are the social determinants that are making people like lose their homes so that we can target them better with advocacy lobbying or strategic litigation efforts.
Wow. Again, taking the innovation up to a whole new level. That's great. I'm interested to know, Josh, I think you mentioned earlier about your API and sharing information. Is that what you're working on right now?
Yeah, so we've been working on our second generation of APIs. Actually, this fall will be actually about 2 years, a little over 2 years. And it's been a monumental project. We've had over 160 engineers working on this. And really, this is kind of building, the first version we came out with, you learn a lot from that, right? When you release something, and you start seeing people use it, you begin to get a ton of feedback. And so this new version of APIs, what we call the Apollo APIs, is kind of the culmination of a ton of feedback over the last 3 years, with a huge engineering effort. But basically, this will lay a foundation for at least the next 5 to 7 years of development that will not only allow kind of on-demand, real-time access to court data, but also produce litigation outcome analytics. So, to give maybe a few things that people are familiar with here in this meeting is, being able to identify bad tenant actors, for example, who are the top eviction landlords that have certain outcomes that you're looking for, right? Being able to do things like we did with University of California, Irvine, where they took, a data set of 2.2 million consumers that were involved in debt collection cases in California, and they matched them up with their credit history to be able to show what effect debt collection has on a consumer, both before, during, and after. And we were able to use our APIs to really update that in a real-time fashion, and then produce outcome analytics to see how many cases ended in default judgment versus settlement, stipulated settlement versus dismissal, and so forth. And so, it's going to beta this fall, or actually it's in beta, it'll be going to GA this fall. I'm pretty excited about what this foundation lays. It allows us now to peek deeper into the docket and peek deeper into, the really unlimited amount of information that's sitting in court documents, to be able to start mining this information out and tagging certain things and making connections within public records.
So the next topic I want to ask you all about is sharing the wealth. Like now that you have had this experience with legal innovation and you know a lot about how to do it, what would your advice be to the up and coming class, like the young innovators out there? Like, what advice would you give them about how to succeed? Josh?
Maybe two things that I've learned to be very valuable, both, I guess not by, one of them is just kind of, that's the direction we ended up going. But the first is don't give up. I think somebody pointed this earlier. As you start down this journey, you're going to pivot a ton of times. You're going to do a lot of things wrong, and you're going to do a lot of things right. And what's important is you learn from that. What you're doing is important and significant. And what's really key is being able to identify the things you're doing right that are really resonating within the community that we're building, and innovating off of that. The second is, especially for, this is not so much in the nonprofit world, although we're all constrained by funding, right? Is don't get on the treadmill of when you start in a legal tech, be prepared to fund yourselves or make arrangements. Don't get on that treadmill of constant, where you have to fundraise in order to survive. You really should think long and hard when you begin to take money, because that money runs out. And then as you'll start to see over this recession, a lot of the legal tech companies most likely aren't going to make it because their model was solely based on being able to raise more funds. And I think it's a real shame because there's so many great ideas and so much innovation happening that I think there potentially could have been other routes, more conservative routes it could have taken. Maybe it's a slower growth thing, more sustainable growth. And I think that's really important. We were able to sidestep that primarily because we couldn't raise funds. So out of desperation, it's funny when you're in a more vulnerable or positions where that's not an option for you, guess what? You find out other solutions. And so there are other alternatives for that.
Yeah, I hear you. Funding is a double-edged sword. Like it's great at the time, but then it definitely puts a lot of pressure on a young startup. So what advice do you have for up and coming legal innovators, Dino? And I know that this is kind of getting a preview of what you're going to be teaching your students.
I feel like in many ways, I'm just echoing what Josh said. Listen, this is hard. You have to steel yourself and get ready for a long haul. And you've got to kind of mentally prepare and be ready to invest and know that there are going to be upturns and downturns. You're going to make mistakes to learn from them. But I think that's exactly right. Go in with that mindset, knowing that that's what's going to happen. Prepared to do battle. That I think that makes it a lot easier. But I was surprised myself, and I say this because I don't think I knew that going in, and and got whipped around a lot.
Ariadna, what would you tell somebody? Let's say somebody who's just showing up to start working at your office about how to do it.
I would recommend to be able to diversify yourself. Like, I totally understand, like, you don't want to be chasing like funding, but I think that's something that's inevitable if you're in the nonprofit sector, or if you're trying to build like something new. So I would tell people, young people that come into our office, to always to be able to do as most as they can, thinking not only about substantive law, but new lawyers need to be able to manage social media. They need to be able to manage media. They need to to manage very basic tech tools. And I'm always concerned, about this, how strict and rigid legal education is still and how different it is from the professional world. And I think that if law schools are not able to grasp this idea of this need to diversify not only knowledge, but to diversify abilities with legal tools, with legal tech tools, people are left behind. So when somebody comes into Ayuda Legal Puerto Rico, the first task that they have is that they have to do everything. They have to do social media, they have to do press releases, they have to do community meetings, community assemblies, litigation. And I think that it's hectic at first, but I think it's a valuable set of skills that they can translate easily to any other place.
How about you, Glenn? What are the words of wisdom for someone starting out?
Learn about change management, because one of our biggest problems as innovators, and I think Dino mentioned this, is the resistance that we can sometimes get from our peers or other people in our organizations. And so one of the things I always suggest to the people that want to start changing the way it's done, because think of what law is. We're from the English common law, and everything is on precedent. What does precedent mean with lawyers? How did we do it yesterday? So, we're not innovative by nature because of our legal system. So one of the things I suggest is, if you want to start getting change in your organization and doing these things, get a committee from broad cross sections that involve all the different job duties and responsibilities on that committee and start talking with them about how they might be able to use technology to improve what they do. Show them what's in it for them as well, not just, you know, what's going to be there for the client. And then don't be afraid to kind of push the boundaries and push management to get these things in. You know, I've always been the kind of ask for forgiveness rather than permission type of guy. And so, you know, to me, I mean, well, that goes way back. I had to sue the Bar Association over advertising, but, you know, I didn't ask for permission. I just did it. But, you know, that's what I would suggest, is to try to get that buy-in from the other people in the organization by involving them in the decision-making process for bringing in new technology, because it's going to be much easier to get that change management if you got that buy-in from the beginning.
Wow. Well, I think those are pearls of wisdom from all of you for young up and coming legal innovators, of which I know there are many, and there's many more to come. And I'm just really excited to see what they all do in the future. We have time for one question that came in, and this one I think is kind of geared towards Ariadna. But the question is access to justice for legal, is it legal services or like getting this in the hands of lawyers? So the idea is kind of like, is it providing legal as a service, or is it simply about facilitating an interaction with the lawyer? And how do you see legal innovation expanding legal services to those in need?
We use legal innovation like technology, like thinking about legal empowerment. So the idea is not only to make that connection to the lawyer, you know, access to justice is a fundamental right, and it has to do with the exercise of other fundamental rights, like the right to housing. So it has to do with, you know, all of the conditions that somebody needs to know, use, and transform the legal structures. So we use them, yeah, to connect with pro bono lawyers, to connect with a panel that we have like for eviction cases, for example. But we also use it so that people like can feel empowered, and that they can feel like in control of their own legal strategy. And most times people don't even need a lawyer at the end. And this is something that we are seeing more and more. I think that self-representation is not only the present, but it's the future of the legal profession. And that's something that I have said like many times before. So I think that legal innovation has to do with how are lawyers going to be accompanying people to that shift, to a legal system where lawyers are simply like not central, not only because people can't afford them, but because lawyers that work with these kind of cases we are not so many.
Yeah, it also reminds me of something that I think Professor Susskind talks about, which is whether or not you innovate by simply reproducing a process that exists right now, but using technology, versus actually rethinking the whole thing. And does anyone else want to jump in on this? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, Tom, I think you've hit it. We've got to really get into judicial simplification. You know, one of the things that's always just thrown me is our rules of evidence. And why in the world do we worry about rules of evidence in a judge-only trial? I mean, this is just the silliest thing. The judge is the one who has to hear to decide whether he's going to hear it. I mean, we should just make it much simpler. And, you know, if we can, make it less adversarial. I mean, putting people on each side of a room and having them fight it out in a courtroom just doesn't seem the best way to me to resolve disputes. So I think, you know, this is not technology, but I really think we have to think about, you know, as Adriana mentioned, the change in the atmosphere where we went from when I started, almost everybody had a lawyer, to now the majority of the people don't have a lawyer. We've got to think about judicial simplification and allowing people a different way to resolve their disputes than just fighting it out in court.
How about you, Dina? What do you think?
So I think Glenn's right. That's why that second project was online dispute resolution, but it wasn't, that name doesn't do it justice, right? Because what we did is we created a wild animal group to go back and just rewrite the rules and said, listen, I mean, you know, we all know the adage about, you know, if you take a bad set of business rules and you put it on tech, you get bad cases done faster. So the charge to the group was come back and rebuild small claims in Utah from the ground up. So now it's asynchronous. You employ technology, right? You can do it. Pew termed it pajama court, and I loved it because you can do it at 2 a.m., right? And but you can the rules of evidence and all the other crap kind of goes out the window. You have a facilitator who's there to help you with the technology, offer like procedural advice, perhaps resolve the dispute, but also to really focus the issues for those very few cases that end up having to be in front of a judge. But I totally agree, right? We need to work on making sure we're giving information and access to people on the outside, but courts have to take a hard look at their own house and change the structure.
Yeah, definitely rethinking it from the bottom up. And you know, it just makes me think that 6-7 years ago when people talked about court advocacy online, like digitizing court advocacy, like how would you do that? And the joke was, oh, what, you're gonna have a robot walk in with a briefcase and try to argue some case in front of the judge. And in fact, what it's turned out to be is actually bypassing that, just completely going around it and then having an online forum that changes the way things are done. So sometimes it's not always what you think. Got a comment from Jane Reardon. Congratulations to the whole panel, disruptors and innovators alike. And I can't agree with her more. I really appreciate all of you coming today and speaking with me and sharing your thoughts about what legal innovation is and sharing the wealth and paying it forward about some pointers to the young up-and-comers about how they can innovate themselves. Any parting remarks?
Thanks, Tom, for doing what you're doing. It's much needed, and keep at it, please.
Well, thank you. I definitely know that that Kat and Patrick truly appreciate that. We couldn't do it without you because we need winners. We need people that are actually showing the way and the path forward, and all of our judges who are fantastic in supporting us. And I also should mention our sponsors. I want to thank ROG Legal, Clio, GNGF, My Case, and LawPay for supporting us. We couldn't do that without them. So thank you very much, Ariana, Ayuda Legal Puerto Rico, and Josh Blandi of Unicourt, Glenn Rawdon of LSC, and Dina Homonis. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Gracias a tú. Adiós.
Thank you.